Hey everyone, and welcome to the Expat Blueprint, the channel dedicated to educating expats to financial freedom. Well, hey, we've reached episode number 10. We've finally hit double digits. I'm really happy with what we've been doing so far. The feedback and support has been awesome. We've barely scratched the surface with all the knowledge that we want to share, and we've got some really cool stuff planned for later on this year, which we really can't wait to share with you. So on to this week, and the next stage of our financial planning pyramid is educational planning, a topic that definitely splits the crowd. We all come from such different backgrounds, and we all had such different experiences in childhood, and all this shapes our opinion towards funding our children's education. We probably all know expats that are like, I didn't receive help with any of my education, and I turned out all right. And we also probably know people who are adamant about saving every penny so that they can make sure that their kids go to that one certain school. One of the major benefits of a quality education is that it gives you choices. As the world's wealth starts dripping down to more of the population, more and more children will start to receive a quality education, and therefore the competition for jobs doesn't just come from people within your town or your city, it comes from all over the world. And this is only likely to develop further as companies become more comfortable with staff working remotely. And whilst I do believe more and more companies will relax the need for formal education in the future, it's still a very easy way for firms to shortlist candidates. But the cost of this formal education just keeps increasing. The average cost of a 3-year degree in the UK is well over £40,000 when you factor in accommodation, food and other lifestyle expenses. We could be talking closer to £100,000 if your child has aspirations of going to an Ivy League or one of the world's best schools. And that's just one child. You might have more than one child. So the question when planning for your children's education is, at what cost? Now, I guess it's important to be clear about the type of education we're talking about. Expats around the globe potentially have to or choose to send their children to a fee-paying primary or secondary school. This schooling cost is likely to be paid from their cash flow from their monthly salary. Some expats are lucky and they might receive support from their employer towards their children's education, but this is becoming less and less frequent. Trying to plan for primary or secondary education during this phase is pretty difficult because unless you started pretty early in your child's life, or even before the child was born, you're unlikely to have a number of years to prepare. Children are going to preschool or nursery from the ages of 2 and 3. So my advice when trying to cope with children's school fees at primary or secondary school is, number one, set up a budget and stick to it. Having a family is not cheap, and there's going to be a lot of other expenses involved other than just education. Make sure you're in control of your money and you're allocating your income to the areas in your life that are important. The last thing we want is for you to have to be funding your children's education fees through credit cards, overdrafts and loans. Not knowing where your money goes isn't an excuse for you to forgive yourself for borrowing on credit cards to maintain your lifestyle. If you need help, revisit episode number 5 and also download the Expat Blueprint budgeting tool to start being in charge of your money and eventually breathe that sigh of relief. Number 2 is make sure you have an emergency fund set up. A minimum of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in a cash account that is accessible but out of sight. If you were to lose your job or had to take time off because of an illness, your children's school fees would still need to be paid, or you'd have to pull them out of school. Your emergency fund gives you time to breathe and time to make more informed decisions about what's next. Number 3 is try and get ahead. If after you've done your budget and you contributed each month to your retirement, or as I like to call it, your financial independence fund, and you still have disposable income left at the end of the month, then use that money to get ahead. Even if it's just one term ahead, imagine how much less stress you're going to be. Again, set up an account that is out of sight but always accessible. It's essential the money you put aside to get ahead with education expenses is out of your everyday expense account. If you leave it in there, unfortunately it's just going to get eaten up funding your family lifestyle. Number 4, last but not least, is do not invest this money. If you're using your salary to fund your children's education and you're going to need this money in less than 5 years, then do not invest this money. You can't afford to experience market volatility when using this money in the short term. If you need to pay school fees and the market falls suddenly before you're making your payments, you could either find yourself with not enough money to cover the fees or be forced to sell at a loss. It's just not worth the risk. Okay, so that leads us nicely to how we can start planning for our children's education. As I've just mentioned, we're looking at future payments that are longer than 5 years away. This might be saving for your children's secondary school education when they're still in primary school, but more than likely, it's focusing on their university or college fees. Let's now go through my top tips when looking to plan for your children's university or college education. Number 1 is first and foremost, start as early as possible. Little and often is the way to do it when it comes to children's education planning. By starting early and investing regularly, What you actually need to contribute towards your children's education will be nothing compared to if you left it 2 to 3 years before. It just takes a bit of planning and a bit of organisation. If education is something that is important to you, then make sure it's a priority in your budget. Remember, it's not going to happen by chance. You have to be deliberate about making it happen. Number 2 is calculate the real needs of your children's education. Unfortunately, it's not just the education fees that are likely to be considered when looking at sending your children to university. Expenses such as accommodation, utility bills, textbooks, mobile phones, food, flight money to come back and see you, this all needs to be added up. According to UCAS website, if your child is looking to go to university in London, this could add up to over £1,000 a month on top of education fees. Once you've got a pretty good grasp of your annual costs, then there are a number of calculators online that can help you approximate what your total cost is likely to be. I found a simple but effective one at www.ardan-international.com. And by clicking the link in the menu bar across the top that says Tool, there you'll find access to the school fee calculator. Alternatively, you can seek professional advice through a certified financial planner. Number 3 is find the right vehicle. If you're living in a country that has dedicated education planning platforms that provide tax relief to yourself and on the money that you're saving, then this could potentially be the best option. If not, then set up an online investment platform that allows you to invest in low-cost index funds. More to come on this when I start the investment series in the next few weeks. Number 4 is educate your children and develop good financial habits. University is just too expensive to go on a 4-year jolly with your pals to find yourself and work out what you want to do next. Of course, university is about having an amazing time, becoming independent and growing as a human being, but there needs to be balance. Helping your children with concepts like budgeting and teaching them the value of money will mean that they're more likely to take the next 4 years seriously, even insisting they get a job while they study to support their living costs. Coming at it as a team will not only help reduce the costs, but also really do wonders for your children's personal financial education. Number 5 is search for grants and scholarships. Each school has a pot of money dedicated to assisting with school fees. Often grants are means tested, and therefore if you're willing to fund your children's education, then you're unlikely to fall into the category where you qualify for financial assistance. But there will be a number of opportunities for your child to apply for scholarships or awards that provide support towards school fees. Whilst your child is assessing their different options for uni, ask the questions about what type of scholarship schemes there are and make sure your child applies. A little bit of effort towards scholarship applications could make a huge difference. Number 6 is work out what schools are best. There are so many great schools worldwide now that I would suggest that unless you're going to, say, an Ivy League school or an Oxbridge school, then paying tens of thousands just for the school's name seems excessive. Is the extra thousands of pounds you pay to go to a school the other side of the world going to be a good return on your investment for your child? Nowadays, some of the most prestigious schools are offering online degrees at a much reduced cost. Now, obviously this isn't going to be suitable for every child, but my point is don't rush into making a decision. It's a huge investment of money and time. Make sure that it's the right fit and serves its purpose. Number 7, and probably the most important, is don't sacrifice your future for the sake of your children's. I said in the previous podcast that doing this would be like helping someone with their life jacket and then drowning in the process because you haven't sorted out yours. Don't put your future years at risk because you want to help your children. We all want the best for our children and we would love them to have the best start in life. But if you're not in a position to do so, then don't start jeopardizing your future. They're gonna be okay. Be there to guide and support them and help them make the best decisions for them. This could actually be more valuable than any monetary support. So education planning, there's definitely a lot to consider. Like I said, the mechanics of how we actually do invest and plan for these expenses, I'll go through in the How to Invest series coming up in the next few weeks. I'm a huge believer in education planning, and myself personally have dedicated the last 7 years of my life to financial planning qualifications and more recently my MBA. But I can definitely recognise an increasing change in how we receive our education, whether it's still in the traditional sense or on-the-job training or even through online courses. However, unless you can see into the future, you're not going to know which direction is best for your child. By being prepared and starting to plan early, at least you have choices. If your child doesn't decide to go to university, then what's the worst that can happen? You've saved a lump sum of money. This could go towards your retirement, help your children on the property ladder, help them start a business, or even treat yourself if you have all the other bases covered. Go on that world cruise or something, you deserve it. So that's all for this week. I hope you found today's episode helpful. As always, if you did like it, please share our content and leave a review. This helps us reach so many more expats. We need your help to educate as many expats to financial freedom. See you all next week, and remember to always dream big.